After seeing a fair amount of interest in my video discussing Ben Reilly's role in Across the Spider-Verse, I wanted to do a deep dive on something I touched on briefly in that video, that being the Spider-Man storyline, the Clone Saga. Now, I've only ever read parts of the definitive synopsis, so I'm going in mostly fresh to this storyline, knowing only small elements and most of the behind-the-scenes bits, which we'll touch on here and there. My main objective with this video, though, is to summarize the Clone Saga as quickly and to the point as humanly possible. That being said, this story is long and split into different sections: the original Clone Saga, the second Clone Saga, and the third Clone Saga. My main goal is to go over the first two since they're the main part of the story most people are familiar with. I'll cover the third eventually, but I want to put my focus on the first two. I want to start by clarifying what exactly I'll be reading, since the overarching Clone Saga is spread beyond multiple different ongoing Spider-Man series. If you look at the reading lists and collected editions, it's completely unclear where to start, and it's really all over the place. I want to get as complete of a story as possible, and was planning on using Marvel Unlimited to do this, which is an awful service, honestly. The reading lists are awful and unorganized, but that's for another video. The original Clone Saga is composed of issues from the Amazing Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man runs from the mid-70s to the late 80s. Most of this serves as context for what's to come down the line. What you need to know is that the inciting incident of the Clone Saga is the death of Gwen Stacy, which I'm sure you're already very familiar with. My reading started at Amazing Spider-Man number 139, roughly 2 years after Gwen's death. Nothing substantial happens here, we just get an idea that a villain named the Jackal has been harassing Spider-Man for the last couple of months, working with other supervillains. The arc with Mysterio in 141 and 142 really kick things off though, with Peter seeing visions of other villains he's fought before, and Gwen Stacy. However, after the visions are stopped, Peter still sees a woman that looks like Gwen, but determines it's probably just a side effect from Mysterio's illusion tech. That is, until he returns home one day to discover Gwen Stacy alive and well in his apartment, who he assumes is an imposter, but later his friends confirm that somehow this Gwen is real, but the deceased Gwen is still in her grave. This is really awkward, seeing how Peter and Mary Jane have only just started to form a connection. The investigation of the clone Gwen leads Peter to question his and Gwen's professor, Miles Warren, as he is the only one who had access to her cell specimens to create the clone. Warren reveals himself to be the Jackal later in the issue, knowing Parker's identity, and explains his thirst for vengeance. Warren was obsessed with Gwen Stacy and jealous of Parker's relationship with her, later blaming Spider-Man for her death. Shortly after, his assistant Anthony Serba successfully cloned a frog, leading Warren to have him do the same with Peter and Gwen's DNA, although Serba assumed they were attempting to clone rats. When he discovered that they were human, he wanted to destroy the clones. Warren then murdered Serba, and the Jackal was born, continuing the creation of his clones, while making Parker's life a nightmare. The Jackal lures Peter into a trap where he comes face to face with a clone of himself. It's unclear which one is the real Peter, but they have to figure it out fast, because only the real Spider-Man is able to save Parker's friend Ned Leeds from a bomb. During a skirmish between the two Spider-Men, the Gwen clone smacks some sense into Warren. He realizes the horrible things he's done and sacrifices himself to save Leeds, with the Spider-Man clone supposedly dying in the process. The Gwen Stacy clone decides it's best if she leaves, determining she isn't the real Gwen Stacy, as Parker returns home to reconcile with MJ. Peter isn't so sure he isn't the clone though. He goes to Kurt Connor's lab to run tests to determine if he is or isn't, but while waiting for the results, is attacked by Alistair Smythe, and comes to the realization that because he has such strong feelings for Mary Jane, and isn't torn between her and Gwen like he was previously, that he has to be the real Peter Parker. The arc ends with him grabbing the research with no intention of reading it. We jump a few years later to the pages of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, where we're introduced to a mysterious new villain called Carrion. He threatens Parker, claiming he is a murderer, and makes it known early in their first fight that he knows Peter is Spider-Man. Peter initially thinks Carrion is just an insane follower of J. Jonah Jameson's anti-Spider-Man rhetoric, who happened to get abilities, but after a few encounters, claims his revenge is personal. He wants Spider-Man dead for the murder of Gwen Stacy and Professor Warren. If you haven't guessed yet, we soon find out that Carrion is Professor Warren's clone, who, because he was never taken out of his cloning pod, aged far beyond death, giving him ghost-like abilities and the touch of death. Spidey swiftly defeats him though, and we jump 10 years later to Spectacular Spider-Man Annual number 7. Peter and the clone of Gwen Stacy reunite while the High Evolutionary soldiers attempt to capture her. Here we learn that Warren didn't technically succeed in the instantaneous cloning that he claimed to. He just kidnapped another nameless woman and modified her DNA to become Gwen Stacy. It doesn't make any sense in context either, trust me. A few months later, Spectacular Spider-Man number 149 returns with a title asking the same question I had. If Gwen Stacy wasn't a clone, what about Carrion? We never get an answer to that, but we do discover that the Spider-Man clone was actually Anthony Serba, Warren's assistant he claimed to murder, and that the DNA alteration is actually a virus, which infects one of Parker's academic rivals, Malcolm McBride, bringing Carrion back. Now this raises several questions for me. Carrion was supposedly created as just a clone of Miles Warren that developed abilities from being stuck in the cloning pod far past his death. So why does this virus bring the newly born Carrion back? All you need to know is there are several retcons and removals of retcons coming, so just keep that in mind. We have one time jump left in the original Clone Saga, in the pages of Spectacular Spider-Man 162 and 163, where the Hobgoblin and Carrion have joined forces. Peter is still trying to figure out how to reverse the effects of the Carrion virus on Malcolm McBride with Reed Richards, but determines it is impossible. Carrion, learning the truth of truly being Parker's former classmate, begins to remember aspects of his former life, leading to him attempting to reunite with his mother. After a battle between Spider-Man, Carrion, and Hobgoblin, Carrion sacrifices himself and Hobgoblin in the process to save Malcolm McBride's mother from one of the latter's pumpkin bombs. That's the end of the original Clone Saga, and where we're going to wrap up this portion of our deep dive into this expansive storyline. So far, it's not bad, not amazing, but it definitely isn't terrible. The worst aspect of the story is reading comics that have horribly dated from the 70s. Every character over-explains everything, and the first 2 to 3 pages is them recapping the previous issue in contrived ways. Not the story's fault, it's just of its time. I'm not a fan of the retcons in the later issues though. I am glad that they will be reversed, but I wonder if it'll be done in a meaningful way. Tell me what you think though. Was the original Clone Saga worth reading? It seemed pretty optional in hindsight, but like I said at the start of the video, I wanted to give you guys as complete a retelling of this story as possible. I'm really looking forward on starting the second Clone Saga, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you click that subscribe button. I really love making these longer videos, so please let me know what you think about them in the comments down below, and we will see you all in the next video.